Hello and welcome to Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV, brought to you by the Center for Constitutional Governance. I am Kwagala, your host. A new wave of political repression is sweeping across East Africa, with deadly consequences for political dissidents and human rights defenders. This even as President Museveni recently confirmed that the Ugandan authorities had actually participated in the abduction and subsequent illegal detention of the Kenyan activist duo of Bobo Njai and Nicholas Oyo, who have since been released from Ugandan detention. On this program, we discuss the implications of this situation for the country's and the region's democratic credentials. Also on the program, we discuss updates from the electoral campaign trail, especially now that the parliamentary race campaigns is officially open. Joining me to dissect these topics is Professor Mwambutsya Ndebesa, a distinguished historian and a political and social commentator. Professor, it's a pleasure to have you this morning. Say hello to the viewers.
Good morning, viewers, and good morning, fellow panelists and the moderator. And once again, I am glad to be here so that we deliberate on these issues of national importance, not only because they are in the news media, but because they shape the developments in the region, and by implication, they affect our social, political, and economic development.
Many thanks indeed, Professor, for joining us. Next to Professor is Mr. Talwana Ernest, who is a mainstay on the program. Ernest is a lawyer and a social commentator. Ernest, good morning. Many thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, Isaac. Good morning, Prof. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to all Ugandans, and I'm glad to be here to discuss the issues of the day.
Thank you. Let us go straight into the first topic of discussion, which is the disturbing human rights and political situation in the wider East African region. Professor, I want us to begin by contextualizing the remarks of the president, where he made a very extraordinary admission and said that, in fact, Ugandan security agencies had abducted and illegally detained the Kenyan activist duo illegally in detention in what he described as a fridge, that they had been kept in a fridge for the last 38 days, having come to Uganda to participate and express solidarity with the presidential candidate of the National Unity Platform, the Honorable Kyagulanyi. I find this confession rather disturbing and extraordinary for a head of state to make. What is your reading of this?
I think President Museveni himself, and even reading his body language, you can see the context that you are asking for. He just said that if any of these boys or young people disturb us or they threaten the state, we shall just put them in the cooler and later on release them. Now, he didn't mention that they would be arrested and be arraigned in the courts of law and the process takes place. No, he simply said we shall put them in a cooler and release them, and he was saying it casually. So it is an instrument of control, and that is an indicator that our governments in the region and Uganda have not taken the issue of rule of law seriously. So and the President Museveni earlier on in his speeches, he normally says that law is just like a blue band. They just put blue band on the bread, but essentially the essence of eating is the bread, is the other carbohydrates, not the blue band. and you can do without blue band. So when he feels it fit, convenient, or the governments feel it convenient, they do away with the blue band and they take the bread, which in this case the bread they mean, those leaders mean power, that they have power and that power is not accountable. And you know, you and me and everybody knows what that means if you have got power that is unaccountable. And as the saying goes, which captures such a situations and conditions, is that absolute power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So when you have a judiciary which was called upon to pronounce itself and order government to produce those inmates, and the judiciary washed its hands off and said, for us, government has told us that they do not have those detainees and we have no reason not to trust government. And the judge kind of was jubilating and celebrating that he had made a very reasonable judgment.
Actually, in his words, he said, while dismissing the application for habeas corpus, that you cannot squeeze milk out of a stone.
So, in other words, he was celebrating that illegal detention of citizens. Because in my opinion, these are citizens of East Africa. And as East Africans, because we are building a East African community. And what does a community mean? A community means people who interact with each other, who are close to each other, who identify with each other. So if these people come to East Africa, to a fellow East African country, actually you could say one of the provinces of the East African community, that's how I use it, of the East African country. And they are identifying themselves with certain causes of a certain party, I don't see why they should be illegally detained or even detained at all, because unless and until they commit a crime which is approved, if anything, let me call it approval because I'm not a lawyer, by the DPP's office. Because they would be arrested by police, charged, taken to court, and the DPP would make a ruling whether they should be charged or not.
That is the due process.
That is the due process. But the due process is not done. That means those people were detained illegally. And they are free to move anywhere in East African community. And that means the East African community we are talking about is not a community of citizens, is now a community of their leaders. It is an interstate outfit without the people, because people should be free to identify with each other. You see, political parties, I'm not saying maybe NOPA has a clear ideology or not, but like if you go to the European countries, people have, parties have particular ideologies. So if you are social democrats, it doesn't matter whether you are in Spain or Italy or France or German or Poland or whatever, you see, you identify with each other. You are kind of political brothers because you are social democrats or you are Christian democrats or you are this new group that has come up now, you are the far right. So you identify with each other, you promote your values, you promote your interests, you promote your ideas, you campaign so that that which you believe in is believed in across the continent of Europe, in that case, in case of EU. So even these East Africans should be allowed to move in various countries, identify with certain parties, so that you find a party in Kenya, a party in Uganda, a party in Tanzania, a party in Rwanda or Congo or Sudan or Somalia that believes in certain values and ideals, campaigns together. That's what should be. That should be the idea.
Professor, aside the violation of the East African protocol, treaty or agreement, let us bring the matter home and interrogate also another interesting but deeply disturbing dimension to this. Yesterday, while the duo was addressing a press conference in Nairobi, they indicated that they had been abducted on the orders of the first son, who also doubles as the country's command of the defense forces. And they were kept in illegal detention in Kasenyi barracks. That is a military facility utilized by the Special Forces Command, the elite section of the army, which is in charge of the first family's security specifically. What does this tell you about the president's ability, or lack of it for that matter, to rein in on a high-ranking military officer who is now directly interfering with political processes? Are we safe as a country?
But you are saying it as if it is new. The president and his son, one time after the court ruling over the military court-martial question in courts, when the Supreme Court pronounced itself, they did say that Uganda does not belong to the judges. The implication is that the judges are not so much relevant to the governance of this country, and that is flouting the principle of the rule of law, because you don't casually just pick people, civilians at that, and you incarcerate them in a military facility, incognito. Nobody knows where they are, much more so when they are foreigners, and you know they are foreigners. And then the case is taken to the court and you just dismiss it. So, if such high-profile people as foreigners who have got their countries to defend and there is a diplomatic issue about them can be taken to such a military facilities incognito, and the courts pronounce themselves, wash themselves off the whole thing, what about the citizens? I mean, the citizens of Uganda. We are, after all, citizens of East Africa, by the way, but what about the citizens of Uganda, where the government has total jurisprudence? That is a very big challenge, and we have many of those. We have Mugumya, who has disappeared in Uganda, and the government says we don't know where he is. We have this fellow of Nupu, what is his name again? The one they arrested in November in 20... Chibarama. Now we have got very many.
Actually, they did indicate that they left hundreds of both Ugandans but also foreign nationals in the detention cells there.
Yeah, but if the government has that impunity of arresting people and keeping them in kuras, as they say, incognito, without informing their relatives, without the access of their lawyers, without access of the families, and much more so without the courts of law intervening, and even the Human Rights Commission, which is mandated to go and find out that it is also helpless. So there are certain institutions which are supposed to mediate between different arms of government, but they have been rendered, I don't want to use useless, but they have been rendered irrelevant. So we are in a situation of absence of rule of law. And in such a circumstances, when we have new wine here, I am referring to the Gen Zs, the young people, generally who have got education and they can access information and news and concepts and happenings elsewhere and compare them with their situation. I think we are now in tension. We are in tension days, and anything can happen, and something has happened. You know, it has happened in Tanzania. It earlier on happened in Kenya, and the CDF says it can't happen here, but that's what people used to say, that it can't happen in Tanzania. but it has happened in Tanzania. So this new wine we have, when you keep it in the old bottles, by the young wine, I'm talking about the young generation, access to technology and the technology we have, and being administered and governed under the ancient methods of rule, as if we are in the demigod days of the Bachwezi or the kings, where you can arbitrarily arrest people. You see, this arbitrary arrest has been historically documented as the cause of revolutions. The most notable revolution was the French Revolution that most people in Uganda and in this region have studied, that one of the fundamental causes of the French Revolution was arbitrary arrest. By that meaning, arresting people without following the due process. Nobody says that people shouldn't be arrested. Nobody says that people shouldn't be charged, but they should be arrested according to the due process of the law.
Thank you,
now,
Professor.
Once you don't do that and you continue arresting people arbitrarily because you have power, because you have the guns, as the Minister Nite used to say, that Turinamaje, I think that does not augur well for one, democracy, but in my opinion, two, for peace, but three, relatedly, for national integration. Uganda is still a geographic expression. Uganda is an emerging state out of colonialism, and instead of understanding people who oppose government, but you just incarcerate them at ease, and you say we shall arrest them, and at our time of deciding we shall just release them as if nothing happened. It does not augur well for those four things I have mentioned.
Thank you, Professor, for your reflections. Ernest, this incident specifically, it has provoked a lot of condemnation from human rights defenders, both here in Uganda, but also in the wider East African region, and even internationally, to the extent that it has taken so much pressure, both diplomatically, but also through citizen-oriented actions, to have the duo released. But let us now focus on the context of the political and human rights situation in the region, because the incident is coming hot on the heels of a disputed election in Tanzania. It is the first in a series of the three, that I mean Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya, because ours is due early next year. Then Kenya will have an election in 2027. Can you draw for us a linkage? Is there some sort of pattern? Are these three states corroborating in stifling dissent, political dissent? What's your observation?
My observation is that the powers that be in all these three respective East African states are realizing that there's a growing younger population that is restless and is not as easily impressed by whatever political actions they're taking. We can see that from the extreme measures taken by the Tanzanian government that have been well reported. There have been some videos on Telegram that have been unpleasant to watch, but signify the threat that the Tanzanian state feels about the younger generation and its agitation towards a different status quo. As Prof has said in detail, there's a clash between young and older generations. As he says, new wine in older bottles. There's this growing acceptance that maybe the older generation does not have all the answers that the younger generation is posing, but they're not going to relinquish power easily, and that is causing this clash. And it's not just a phenomenon in East Africa, it's happening across the world. East Africa is just, I'll say for the lack of a better word, more brazen about crushing dissent. Other states will allow protests to a certain extent and then bring in police for crowd control. In East Africa, unfortunately, we are not as polite or should I say, sophisticated in dealing with political dissent. We are outright in our actions, and we are cruel in our cruel in our ability to deal with youth protests, and it's emblematic of the fact that we are not old states, we are young states. Majority of us got independence around the same time, and majority of the powers that be that rule are people who are pivotal in shaping these states, and in just 12 to 20 years straight out of independence.
Ernest, are you contending that such is a characteristic of a nascent state?
I will say that most states start off in a brutish form before they develop some sense of sophistication. I will say it is more the norm than outliers. Most states start off in some brutish manner before they learn to respect the rule of law and the separation of the army from the police in terms of crowd control. I will give the example of the French state. The French state was straight out of a revolution. There was a reign of terror. Then even after that, they entered into some sort of military enforced monarchy. Then after that, there were subsequent revolts in 1830, 1848, and so on. They've had 5 republics up to now. It doesn't mean that it has all been peaceful, and this is a country that is about 600 years old. What about East African states that are about 6 decades old? That the youngest being about 60. It's emblematic of our states, and it's unsurprising, but it does not give us leg room to be forceful in dealing with youthful uprisings. If anything, it just shows that our states lack ideas. Very few have an idea of trying to set youth to satisfy youth discontent, because majority of youthful problems are related to unemployment, related to lack of social safety nets, related to political uncertainty in majority of the 3 East African countries. Even Kenya, who we call a democracy, every single election comes with some sort of uncertainty. Are we going to have a 2007 again? Are we going to have a 2007 again? Because Kenya is as tribal, is as fractured ethnically as Uganda tends to be, or rather is. So when you have these various contestations, it makes you realize that our states are still young and they're still figuring themselves out for the most part. And because of that phenomenon, you'll have generational clashes until we develop some sense of sophistication in dealing with different divides. And some of these are out of our control. But still, for the most part, what is within our control can be deliberated. That which cannot be deliberated is very little. So that is what causes all this political disharmony. And going into 2026...
Or arbitrated.
Yes, arbitrated.
And unfortunately for Kenya, to a certain extent, their courts of law are relatively independent, and they can arbitrate and mediate. Whereas in Uganda, our courts have been fused with the executive.
Yes. So going into 2026 and 2027 in Kenya, it will be one to watch, because majority of the issues of 4 decades ago are still the same. We are still very deeply ethnically divided. We still have strong debates about the separation of powers amongst the state and the judiciary and the legislature. And all these will come to the front in 2026 here, and also 2027 in Kenya. And there's no simple answers, but these are continuous debates amongst different parts of the public, and for the most part, it's uncertain. I will say that much. It's uncertain, but this is something that we have to contend with as people observing our political climate.
Final on this aspect, Ernest, because what you discuss tends to raise some sort of paradox.
Yes.
The young people constitute the largest voter bloc, but also in terms of the population demographics, they constitute the largest proportion of the population across the board, not only in East Africa, I mean globally in contemporary terms. But how come that they seem to have a raw deal in terms of governance. What is the real missing link? Because there is a lot of disenchantment from, even we just witnessed it in the recent US elections, which is a model democracy. In the UK, what is the actual missing link that needs to be solved?
I'm going to say this at a human level. Let's just use a family as a core, as a smallest unit of a state. In a family, you'll have the head. The head has his own ideals, and then you'll have maybe his young adult son who has now come of age. The head of the family has his own ideas of how to run his household and how to manage it. Then you have the youngest who probably, I'll say, still staying at home and disagrees with how management works in this household. Just because he disagrees does not mean that he's now going to take the reins of control of the household. The household still belongs to the main patriarch, and unless he moves out of the household and forms his own, there are always going to be clashes. So now, if you're to bring this to the level of a state, there's a strong divide between the young and the old. If you're to use the United States as
but that analogy does not apply very well, because the head of state is not the owner of Uganda or Kenya or Tanzania.
I agree, yes.
So, but the other one of the family, you could say that is a family affair, and the head of the family owns the property and all that, but the head of state is not the owner of Uganda or Kenya or Tanzania. He's not. He's only the head.
I agree, but our reality tends to disagree. So when you have a state like Uganda, where I will say that the president, as he has repeated many times, fought for our peace, he's not going to relinquish that control easily. So there's obviously going to be strong clashes between the youth. I'll say maybe actually not maybe, I'll speak with regard to NUP, their head, Mr. Chagulani, and then the president. There are those clashes because he represents a younger agitated mass who wants more. And then there's an older entrenched interests who obviously are not going to relinquish it easily, and that's just what it is.
Maybe to clarify it further,
Yes.
Ernest, is it a contestation for power or a clash of ideas?
It's both. It's a contestation of power and a clash of ideas.
It is ideas around power now.
Yes.
But I want to slightly disagree with the question of intergenerational clash necessarily. Yeah, that element is there, but also, Chiza Besigye is in prison, and his colleague and others are in prison. So I think that is important, but it is possibly secondary. The intergenerational, important though, and significant, and it can shape the future, but also it is a question of new ideas clashing with people with old ideas. So there is a clash of attitudes and values. I think the older generation or some members of the older generation are really harboring those dictatorial authoritarian values, if I can call them values, but I don't think they are even values. And then there are those who are opposed to those values. So as I normally say here, there is a clash of privileged classes and those who are for social justice. So you have got social justice forces and privileged forces, and the privileged forces are pushing back when the justice forces are also pushing those privileged forces to have inclusive politics, the rule of law, the social justice, equality, and the rest. So there is a clash of ideas and values, but there is also, to a certain extent, as he points out, also some kind of intergenerational clashes, but it is not so much generational. It is only that there is a coincidence that the young generation are the most aware compared to the old generation.
More conscious than the older generation?
Older generation, yes, relative terms. But there is an older generation that is aware also. So the older generation that is conscious of their rights actually are in alliance with the young generation.
Okay, that's interesting. Ernest, as you sum up.
No, yes, I agree with Prof. He has actually bolstered my submission. I'll even use the English Civil War as an example. It was a clash between monarchism and republicanism. Obviously, it was not a complete revolution, but it shows that, I mean, the English who are our colonial masters at some point had various clashes in their own history. So if you're to borrow from that and you juxtapose it on our reality, there are going to be various clashes between different ideals across both, actually between different ideals and different generations. At the end of the day, it comes down. It cannot be finally predicted which ideals win, because contestations are continuous across the world, especially when it comes to ideals. So when it comes down to East Africa, which we are discussing today, these contestations are always going to exist. In Tanzania, where for the most part of their history it has been a one-party state, and now there's a semblance of multipartyism, but in reality it's been one party continuous in power. And then you have the reactions, as you have seen over the previous 2 weeks, and then you have Kenya, where there's a constant agitation because of the vast income inequality in the country, and obviously deeply embedded ethnic divides. And in Uganda, where for the past 40 years we've been under one leadership, especially for majority of young people. So because of these various contestations, there are always going to be clashes, and it will not end. And I do not see any one point where it ends. It is just how society is. There are constant clashes between ideals and between different power divides, and it's just how society tends to be.
Thank you for those insights. Professor, final on this topic, what is the likely impact on the tenability or feasibility of the East African Community Project? Because now the ultimate dream seems to be federation, but can we federate under the current conditions?
Yeah, we can federate if we draw some parallels in European history. We can have a federation of authoritarians. In other words, it will not be a federation of the people, of citizens, but a federation of the state leaders who conspire to suppress dissent, who conspire suppress any dissenting views, alternative policies. And so we can have a federation, but it will not be sustainable, that federation. In fact, in Europe, there was such a federation which some politician called an unholy alliance. So that concept of unholy alliance that we apply to UPC and KY actually is borrowed from that European experience. So I think the Standard newspaper of Kenya had the title this week, I've forgotten.
Trinity
Is
of oppressors.
Is it a trinity of terrorists, of terror or something like that? So we can have that federation, but it's not sustainable. It does not augur well with democratic processes until such a time when those in power will realize that you need to also listen and understand those who hold alternative views. Just listen, not use force. You see, they think that using force and coercion is in two ways, by the way. It can be monetary coercion, because that is also coercion, buying off people. But buying support does not mean that you have won the hearts. No. That's why people get 90% of votes. But when they are overthrown or something happens, the same 90% is against them. It's because they would have won the votes without winning the hearts. So my appeal to those in power, that they should take time off and listen. Try to listen and understand. And so use force, maybe in the case of emergency, when there is a threat of the state integrity, you can use force. But after that, try to understand. I will use a quick example that is still happening even now. The Kasese incident. That Kasese incident happened in 2016. Was it 2016?
Yes.
Yes. And the government used the force to suppress, but the government didn't attempt to listen and understand those groups. What is the problem? Try to understand what is the problem and then look for dialogue and solutions. So the government said, for us, we shall use force. We arrested people. Now people have died. I don't know, and I see some soldiers and the RDCs and some administrators celebrating. For heaven's sake, nobody should celebrate the deaths of fellow citizens. I get incensed by celebrating the deaths of fellow citizens. In fact, I would advise the government, if it still has songs of NRA, those songs, the military songs, which seem to celebrate the deaths of fellow citizens, to kind of put them down. You don't celebrate the deaths of fellow citizens. Yes, I am not saying that the state shouldn't have handled that insecurity. You handle it, and then after you have brought peace, no, not peace actually, that is not even peace, because we said peace is the presence of justice. After you have brought order, order doesn't mean peace. It doesn't. Even when you are in prison, there is order. There is no rioting, so you can't say there is peace in the prison. Or if, for example, the head of a family, the analogy he was using, comes home and everybody keeps quiet, you can't say that is peace. No.
Enforced peace.
That is not even peace. That is order. We must make a distinction between peace and order. You can have peace in order. You can have non-peace where there is even order. So we need to listen. Where there is dissent, those peasants, for example, in Rwenzori there, I mean, these are people with strange ideas, strange beliefs, believing in medicinal cures and protection. You try to understand these peasants. Imagine somebody having a panga and attacking a military barracks where people have even big guns and small guns. So instead of celebrating that I have killed, these stupid people have killed, please try to understand them after you have established a normacy and order. Understand what makes these people commit suicide. When somebody tries to commit suicide, you bring psychologists to help this person. You don't say, you don't give him another rope and say, you go and even kill yourself. There should be empathy. I think our school system, our school systems, our institutions like the church, our institutions like cultural institutions should teach, should promote empathy. Empathize with somebody who dares to commit suicide. And therefore, after the government, the military has established order, then you go ahead and try to understand why these people can believe. You know, those beliefs, by the way, let me there give some analysis that is controversial. You know, most people believe, most beliefs are why people believe generally. There are those who have analyzed it that it is because of the trinity of insecurity, powerlessness, and scarcity. When people feel insecure in terms of physical security, or insecure because there is scarcity, or they are powerless to do something, they turn to metaphysics, they turn to religion. So those people in Kasese are turning to religion not because they want it, and not because they want to die, and not because they are mad, but we need to go and understand them. Let there be a commission of inquiry, do research now, not the legal inquiry. There is need to do research and find out what exactly makes those people do what they are doing, which looks absurd, but try to understand them. Now, applicable to your question, the Gen Zs and other people in East Africa who are demanding for their rights and space, political space, should not be imprisoned. You can first bring order, yes, use the crowd control and whatever, but afterward listen to them and try to implement what they are demanding. It is not that they are mad, it is not that they are stupid, it is not that they can't think, it is not because they are against society, it's not because they are criminal. That violence you see in Kenya and Tanzania is not, I am glad I'm talking to lawyers. I don't know whether you make a distinction in your law schools. There is criminal violence and political violence. What has happened in Tanzania and what happened in Kenya was not criminal violence. It was political violence. Now, political violence, you try to understand and appreciate why that violence and find solutions that will bring harmony and peace to the community at large.
Thank you, Professor, for those viewpoints. Focus on Parliament takes a short break. Do stay with us. We'll see you shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back. You are watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV. In this segment, we discuss election updates, especially that now the parliamentary electoral contest campaigns are officially open. Let me start with you, Professor, on this again. What is your feeling of the conduct of the campaigns? Because prior to the official opening of the campaigning period, there has been a lot of buzz, politics generally, largely on the presidential scale, but we understand that also the contenders for the various parliamentary positions have been making approaches to the public, selling their manifestos, laying groundwork. What is your feeling? Do you feel that the conduct of this election is going to be issue-based, or it is going to based on some other elements?
I don't think largely it is not a contestation of values and ideas and standpoints or ideologies. It is a contestation of individuals who want to get in positions of power and leverage those positions for their own material satisfaction. Because right now I have not had a contestation of ideas, even at the presidential elections level. And here and there people talk about them justice, I don't know what, but by and large it's not a contestation of ideas. And this is explained by a large number of independents and people just standing for the sake of standing. I think I had in much in the West or back in the whatever, they are now more than 20 candidates. I don't know
22
how
be
those
exact.
are going to fit on the ballot paper, and when the people are voting, they will continue. rolling the paper in order to find where their candidate is. So the parliamentary elections have started more or less on a low key. Prominent things that we see that are in the public sphere and which people are looking at is contesting the nominations, actually, the nominations, you know. Warakaga versus Segona, they are now before the Electoral Commission. I think somebody in Isinjiro has also been actually denominated, if I can use that word. And
even the position of the leader of opposition is under threat by a Kampala lawyer.
You know,
Bawe, Ivan. He has challenged the nomination, his nomination.
The nomination in
Nakawa
Nakawa
East.
somewhere.
Yes.
So those are now the prominent issues. And you see, those who are challenging their friends are not challenging them on issues of principle. They are challenging them on technicalities here and there. It is just malice. You just want to take advantage to get rid of your competitor, not based on values. In our vernaculars here, ensonga. We don't have politics of ensonga. We have politics of positions. And that is going to define, that is what is defining the competition. Of course, the competition is also going to be defined by corruption, electoral corruption. Unfortunately, even anti-corruption institutions like the IGG or CID, when it comes to electoral corruption, they don't seem to include it in the corruption, because this is a time when anti-corruption institutions should also be on the lookout to discourage that corrupt behavior of individual candidates. But they are not doing it. They are not even doing it in the media. So we are going to witness a situation where people are going to use money to coerce people to support them. So it is those most likely who have got organizational capacity, not political ideas, that are likely to take the day. Organizational capacity here, but I'm not using absolute terminology, absolute conclusions that issues may not arise in certain places and determine the day. But largely it is going to be money, except to a certain extent in the Uganda region, where NUP is predominant, because there people are likely to vote NRM versus NUP in terms of what people think of them, because there are some people who think they are marginalized and excluded. However, to a certain extent, why people, for example, get excited about Bobby Wine Kyagulanyi, it may not be that they want the person per se, but it is because they are protesting against exclusion. The governance that has practiced that exclusion by way of promoting privileges. But this is to a limited extent anyway, because you can find the people in Karamoja who are the poorest, and actually who are the poorest are not raising those issues of their poverty per se. Or possibly they don't understand them clearly. They think that they are poor because because they are poor. You know, we are poor because we are poor, or because we fought the war. That doesn't necessarily follow that because they fought the war. Rwanda fought the war, but it is to a certain extent doing very well after not so long a time. So it's not necessarily the question of the war, although the war affected them, but there are other issues like marginalization, access to resources, access to public resources, I don't see it being brought out in these campaigns. Because they are public resources, and public resources are not necessarily land, because land is some land may be public, because in some communities they have land which is being grabbed by those in the government or associated with the government. But you can talk about scholarships. Scholarships are an issue. Loans, forget about this PDM, which is for everybody. There are bigger loans somewhere, and some people access them and others do not access them. We are talking about contracts and tenders. Some people access them and some people don't access them. They were talking about licenses. Some people access them and some do not access them. And positions in the government. Some people are employed based on cronism. Cronism is this support patron-client relationships, where the members of parliament now who are aspiring are in between are agents, and then you have got the patrons, those who decide power, make decisions, and then on the lower end you have got clients. Those are the issues which should be coming up in these elections, but unfortunately they are not prominent, and people might resort to a certain extent to tribes. Which tribe do you belong to? Which religion do you belong to? Which party are you associated with? Not necessarily what the party stands for, but which party you belong to. But of course, what is also deciding issues is the organizational advantage of, for example, NRM. It has got RDCs. That is a resource of government. And RDC is supposed to be a public servant. But I heard the commissioner for Western Uganda, in these days they are commissioners, RDCs who don't have residents. They are commissioners for... He was bluntly saying before the cameras that civil servants, he was addressing civil servants, that go and break the civil service order law and campaign for the president. This is a civil servant. Break the law. Another RDC of Kabale, I watched her also. She was saying, people don't embarrass me here in Kabale by going to listen to Kyagulanyi. Don't. So you have the RDCs, you have ambassadors are soon coming if they have not yet come. Of course, there are ministers with all the resources they have. You have security forces who are getting involved. You have the DSOs, the ISOs, the GSOs, and all that. So the issues of the day will not be decided by the ideas, by ensonga, but by organizational capacity, by militarism, by maniocracy, if you can put it that way, or kleptocracy. And I don't think that there is even much excitement, because unless there is a clear competition of ideas or policy positions or another nsonga, because nsonga can be anything. It could be those who want federal. I don't know whether that is now on the table and being discussed. It could be accountable government, but I don't see it on the ground. But there is something that is likely also to make to shape the developments now. This arresting of people by government, these political prisoners, I think to a certain extent in certain areas, it is going to be a campaign issue. The political prisoners. And by the way, any democracy, any functioning democracy can be characterized by having no political prisoners. I don't see why we claim to be a democracy and we have political prisoners. Because really, those political agents, political activists are not criminals. That's not criminal activities. Those are political activities that might flout certain rules. But even government people are floating rules like that RDC. He says, you civil servants break the law in order to vote for somebody. Another one says, don't listen to somebody, but he's a registered voter. Even the Prime Minister herself was in Chibare saying it openly. Yeah? Mutakaza rare ya kakachagurani muka boycotting, even belittling a whole presidential candidate, because that word kachagurani is an abusive term, an abusive word. It is derogative. And you have a presidential candidate who leads currently the biggest opposition, and you are belittling somebody, don't go to the rally, and that is not being punished. So anyway, in my conclusion is that yes, we may have a smooth exercise, but it will depend on also the behavior and actions of the Electoral Commission. Let the Electoral Commission be seen to be fair and just to all, and not taking orders from everybody. There was a time when there was a Kabgai during the CA. I think that is the Electoral Commissioner who actually did his work. Unfortunately, again, his mandate was not renewed. For him, when he heard that there is a government official, police or whatever interfering, by then we didn't have this social media, we didn't have many TVs, but he would go on Radio Uganda and warn that officer and order the provincial commissioner, the regional police commissioner to rein in on such a policeman who is interfering with the elections. If it was an RDC, he would also direct him and name him and say, RDC, please stop interfering in my docket. That is not your work. I have my officers there on the ground. But this Byabakama, for him, he says, we shall follow the law. And according to Byabakama, the law, it is the work of the police to bring law and order. I have nothing to say. Last time in last elections, he made a funny joke, a rude joke, and said, for me, when they asked him whether he had seen how the Kyagulanyi and the Amuriat were being harassed during the nomination exercise, and he said, I don't know those things. After all, my TV, expired. Subscription expired. It was a bad joke.
Thank you, Professor.
Byabakama, that was a bad joke. I wish somebody could take this message to you, since you have not subscribed to TV up to now, and you have not subscribed even to this social media. Let somebody go and tell you, Byabakama, that was a bad joke, that you are joking in issues of national significance, and this country could go down the cliff because of one position like you. So, Byabakama, stop bad jokes.
Ernest, so far the conduct of the presidential elections, the campaigning process, has been described as smooth, variably as low energy by other observers. But I think the general assessment, as Professor has pointed out, is that there is no much excitement. Do you expect a marked difference in the parliamentary context now that officially the campaigning period has begun?
I expect parliamentary elections to be more contested.
Why is that?
Because there's no parliamentarian who can claim that their seat is entrenched, that they cannot campaign or they cannot go out there to try and pull voters. So one way or the other, it's going to be contested across the country. I cannot think of one parliamentarian who outrightly says this seat is guaranteed. So for the parliamentary elections, there's going to be more contestations. You could see all the way from the nomination process and the infighting between different nominees for the seats in their respective parties. So now that we're heading into the race itself, There's going to be more contestation, and I expect social media to be awash with different, both comical and serious issues.
But in certain regions like southwestern Uganda, western Uganda, almost all the NRMs are assured of getting the seat. Because the other parties are not on the ground, they are not allowed to set up structures, and there will not be agents anyway during the voting. So expecting such a regions like western Uganda, that is where you get most spoiled votes. Spoiled votes actually will be those of the opposition. Once you are in opposition, your vote will be, and you are voted, your vote will be spoiled by the people from the Electoral Commission.
But
By
Professor,
the returning officers.
Does that observation account for the variable of the independent candidates who could actually come and destabilize the prospects of the flag bearers?
The independent candidates are going to be sorted out by RDCs and GSOs and DSOs. They will be sorted out in certain regions. The few could have strengths, but the majority will be sorted out. By sorting out, I mean that those the system, the NRM system
Internally?
It's not internally, even openly, publicly, will constrain their ability to win. Because you people have not participated in these exercises. I think you just talk from here. Some of us participate physically. Do you know that they go now? They have exercise books or some kind of where to write. You know, they start, if they know you are not supporting the regime, these security forces, security operatives, they have a list now. They are listing the names of those people who are not supporting the president. They have a list, and they are going to, if you are a GISO, you submit it at the district level, at the DISO. And then they discuss it. The security committee discuss it at that level and the upper level. And then they go to sort out those members they have listed. So it is more or less like opposition has been criminalized. So you are listed as more or less like a criminal. And then the different structures, of the government pounce on those people who are listed. And they pounce on you in many respects than one. Even during this period, in case some cows of somebody stray in your garden and you take the case to those authorities, they would simply tell you, but you vote on the opposition. We are not going to listen to your case. You go to Chaguranyo Nandara Mafabi, and he comes and solves your problem. So because people fear that, there are structural constraints that undermine people's voting capacity.
Ernest, yes, your opinion?
Yes, he raises a valid point. Southwestern Uganda is an interesting.
Western almost.
Anyway, southwestern and western Uganda is an interesting phenomenon because they're predominantly yellow. Eastern Uganda tends to, it's more enigmatic. You can never really tell where they blow. Sometimes they vote incumbents. Other times they throw up a surprise. It really depends on the winds with Eastern Uganda. With North, the North is as much. And
with respect to Eastern Uganda specifically, what is the predominant sentiment?
Depends on the region. I will say Eastern Uganda is quite an enigma. They go with whichever is a prevailing interest. There's no one interest that is supreme. It's,
in other words, you are saying Eastern Uganda is more or less not a voting bloc.
They're not a voting bloc.
It's malleable.
It's malleable, yes. And possibly that's why they have never had a president since independence.
Could be. Yes.
But I'm theorizing.
The only region.
I'm theorizing.
No, that's a valid point. I mean, they've never.
There is no political East.
There's no political East.
Whereas you could have political Buganda,
yes,
political West, political North, but there is no political East.
Yes, so
the East is a geographic expression.
It's just a geographic expression. It's enigmatic. Depends on Depends on the sentiment of the people. I mean, you could literally come representing the yellow flag, but because they do not know you, they will ignore you. So the East is hard to predict. I can't say that that they vote based on ideas. It's a mix of sentiment.
So in the language of USA politics, it is a battleground. There is
yes.
People, certain areas which are neither there nor here, and you can just go there and battle for anybody.
Yes, that's essential. That's essentially Eastern Uganda. Even Teso, where the current speaker comes from,
you can't take it for granted.
You can't take them for granted. They're very enigmatic people. She might say her district is guaranteed, but other parts
or her position
specifically,
yes,
might other parts of Teso will say no. We do not agree.
What's different?
Exactly. So the parliamentary elections are going to be interesting. I'll say as much as Eastern Uganda, because the interesting thing is, as Prof has said, unlike the West that tends to have a sort of perception of things, the East is unpredictable. There's no one who can authoritatively say I speak for the East. There's no one who speaks for the East. People tend to be as unpredictable and malleable as it gets. I cannot say much for the North, but Eastern Uganda it's unpredictable.
In terms of your prediction, do you see an increase in the opposition tally in terms of the parliamentarians for the next electoral cycle?
It will depend on the sentiment of the day, because recently we have been seeing a rise of red in Busoga, but even Busoga is also contested with yellow. So it depends, and even you're saying Busoga alone, but there are various parts of the East. There's Bukedi, there's also Bugisu, there's also Karamoja,
Kapchorwa,
there's Sebei. All these regions, yes, you might say, oh, Sebei is yellow, but there's no outright yellow in that area. It depends on the day. So come 2026 February,
yes,
February, it will be interesting to watch.
Professor, what is your analysis of now the practical politics? Do you think the presidential race could influence the outcome of the parliamentary race, or it is the other way around?
No, it does. It does. But as my colleague has pointed out, you see, Uganda's voting pattern is not very clear for some regions. Of course, we know that certain aspects influence or shape the voting pattern in Uganda, like ethnicity. It does influence that one. And in this case, if you look at like Bugisu, we may have a relatively better performance for FDC. In that case, the candidate might influence the voting pattern, but even of the parliamentarians, you never know. You could get the parliamentarians around that. In Western Uganda generally, in general terms, I think the voting pattern will be that those parliamentary candidates of the ruling party are likely to get through. In the Buganda sub-region, I think parliamentary candidates who are not NRM as such may take advantage of that, and the Kampala region and get through. Now, in northern Uganda, which has turned yellow of late, at least by perception, we have. So the parliamentary candidates who are supporters of the presidential candidate might get through, maybe with the exception of Lango, but it is also that they had expected the Akena to stand. If he had stood, I think he would have made much difference for the parliamentary candidates, much more than himself. But I don't know how he's doing it. I don't know why he didn't stand as an independent. If I was him, I would have stood as an independent and be given a symbol like a watch, a clock, but still campaign as if I am
UPC.
UPC proper. And put on even my red
Regalia.
and even use slogans of UPC. But I tell them that when you are voting, vote the watch or the chair or whatever the case may be. That way he would have also galvanized political support for his MPs around the UPC ticket. And so the ticket of the party of FDC, of NUP and NRM can translate into shaping the support for the various members of parliament. But of course, these other parties or these other presidential aspirants are inconsequential. They are so inconsequential that I don't think they will shape the outcome of parliamentary candidates. But those three, the NRM, NUP, and the FDC, to a certain extent, they will influence the voting patterns for parliamentary candidates and subsequently even local council elections. But as I said earlier on, it is not that those people are going to be convinced at heart. It is not that the voters have the candidates at heart. They will give them votes because they are coerced, because there is coercion, both financial and physical, and then they vote you. Coercion, because, for example, as President Museveni normally puts it when he's campaigning, he tells certain people in a certain constituency that if you don't vote me, you have committed suicide. He uses it. I'm not the one manufacturing it. And when somebody who has committed suicide, people don't mourn you. So if you vote the opposition, I will not provide services. Now, that is coercion. That is coercive language. So people can be coerced. And you know, as I said here before, the peasants, and not only peasants, citizens have got a high sense of survival. Let me call it that. They have got a high sense of survival. They will say, candidate Y, we can see you have very good ideas and values, and we can see you are a man or woman of integrity, but we know that when we vote for you, we shall have wasted our vote in the sense that your party will not go to government and therefore we shall lose out on the goodies. But two, we know that your vote is going to be rigged after all. Or three, if we vote you, we shall be harassed after elections. So rather than being harassed, we know, we understand you, we love you, we support you, and we have you at heart, but we shall vote otherwise. So, in other words, what am I saying here? That in most of these African countries or these banana republics, if we can use that expression, the vote does not reflect the aspirations of the citizens. The vote does not reflect that the candidate so voted, people have him at heart. It is that the structural conditions are prevailing in that country do force people, do coerce people to vote the way they vote. So the outcome of elections does not necessarily reflect the aspirations and interests and the values of the population, but because people are coerced by the structural circumstances. And the structural circumstances are many. One is poverty. Poverty is coercive. Ignorance can also be coercive. Of course, physical force is coercive because people predict that if I don't vote like this, I'm likely not to get PDM money. If somebody's cows stray in my garden, I'm not likely to get justice. If some other fund from government comes, I will not have access to it. If a scholarship comes around, I will not get the scholarship. And a combination of all these coerces people into voting the way they vote in Africa generally and Uganda in particular. So that is how I am looking at it. So the voting pattern in Africa follows certain trends: tribe, religion, money, security, and things like that. So at the end of the day, you don't get the outcome reflecting the support, the genuine support and aspirations of the people. And because of that, the consequence of that is weak states. The consequence of that is weak governance. The consequence of that is authoritarianism. The consequence of that is a threat to existence. It is an existential threat to the existence of these states. And that's why we have political prisoners. Because political prisoners are there because of coercion. You are not only coercing the person you have imprisoned, but you are sending the message to those who are likely to vote like he was likely to vote, that this is likely to happen to you. I will give you an example of these NUP supporters who were arrested in Mbarara. Really? What crime had they committed? Nothing. Completely nothing. Because the police spokesperson alleged that they had committed crimes elsewhere. But most of those people who were arrested going to Gizibwera, they were not people from outside Mbarara town. They were people from around. But they are arresting them in order to send a message to the population that what has happened to these people we have incarcerated. Can you imagine people were taken to prison and they remained chained? They remained in the handcuffs throughout the night, more than 24 hours? That is inhuman. That is inhuman. What kind of policeman chains you for no good reason and leaves you the handcuffs in your hands? You cannot even go for a short call. I don't know how they ate. I don't know how they slept. And among them, by the way, they are parliamentary candidates. So those will not vote. I mean, will not campaign. I don't know how they will vote for them, but they will vote for them since they had already registered. But you are not campaigning. So I think the aim actually was to arrest those campaign agents and campaign and party candidates so that they don't vote. And the message was sent that coercion. But fellow citizens and those who are listening, that weakens not only democracy, it does not only weaken the state, it even is an existential threat to the integrity of these emerging states. If you don't practice justice, you cannot have peace. However much you preach peace, as long as there is absence of justice, you will not have peace. And however much you coerce people using physical means, administrative means, military means, monetary means, legal means, they will not have you at heart. They will postpone the challenge, but the challenge will remain. And that's why we had an appearance of peace in Tanzania. The Tanzanian case is very clear. There was an appearance of peace in Tanzania. So where did it disappear all of a sudden? Did people become mad overnight? And was that collective madness arising out of the real madness? Or it is because they had subdued that feeling that there is injustice and it blew up? And that's why we have got these things in the developing countries in Africa and the Middle East. They are common in Africa and the Middle East. But also in Eastern Europe, where you have had those revolutions, the color revolutions. There was the orange revolution, the rose revolution, the red revolution in Eastern Europe. Why? Because there was injustice and there is a limit to which people can be coerced once there is injustice. And people are not listened to and people are not understood.
Thank you, Professor, for those observations. Ernest, as we conclude, I want us to spotlight one unique battleground in northern Uganda, particularly the Lango sub-region, the constituents of Lila municipality, the woman MP position, where two ministers are contending for a parliamentary slot. One is the Honorable Jane Ruth Acheng, the Minister for Health. The other contender is the spouse to the UPC, Among Obote. Interestingly, both are in government. One, of course, on account of the cooperation agreement they have with the ruling party. The other one is in the ruling party proper. What do you think is the likely outcome of this race?
It's unpredictable, but I'm sure the losing party will probably file a petition.
A petition?
That's guaranteed. The losing party next year will likely file a petition. You cannot know who will outrightly win, because again, they're not campaigning on issues. They'll most likely say that give me the seat, I'll do this, I'll do that, but I doubt any is campaigning on any substantive issues. So whomever is going to win will obviously face pushback from the losing party, will most likely take it to an election petition, and that's obviously going to be the norm next year, as it was in 21 and years before that. So I cannot authoritatively say that one party has a manifesto that speaks more profoundly than the other, but I can already foresee an election petition coming.
Considering the electoral injustice suffered by Honorable Jim Akena, who has been barred from contesting for the presidency, do you foresee a scenario where the UPC is once again co-opted into government post the 2026 electoral period?
2026 is apart from the position of president, which is almost just a ceremonial thing. The rest is all up in the air. We cannot tell what will happen at the parliamentary level. So, like everyone else, we're all spectating and seeing what unfolds. In politics, a week is a long time. So the only thing I can authoritatively say that I predict is the losing party will most likely file a petition on a variety of grounds, and that is guaranteed come February. Everything else will depend on the sands at the time or the climate of the time.
But he is trying to find out from you whether Akena's alleged support in Lango sub-region might be used as a stick or an advantage for Museveni to co-opt him into the new cabinet or even the wife of Akena.
I am no insider, so I cannot speak authoritatively on that. But yes, I mean, a cooperation agreement has been mentioned, so who knows? He might use that as leverage for his own advantage. But I mean, at the end of the day, politics is never static, so you can never tell what will come March next year.
Professor, given that the political couple is strongly disenchanted, what do you see?
Oh, you mean Akena and the wife? And
the wife, yes. And given that array of complicated circumstances.
In fact, we can add on an injustice to Among, because I think there was a time when she had her posters plaqued down by the government officials. And I think
ahead of the president's visit.
And she felt very bad. I had a police officer arguing that, you see, because people have not been nominated, therefore they cannot put up posters, whereas there were posters throughout the country, but particularly those of Amongin. Is it Among?
Among, yes.
They were the ones which were pulled down. So she must be considering it as an injustice. You know, Obote Lango sub-region still has that Obote feeling that Obote and other of their leaders, you know, this identification with people from your community, even in Lango, and like say where people in Uganda might be surprised to know that in Lango there is Obote road, there is the Oito Joka road, there is Smith upon the Chaka road, or whatever the case may be. So there, I think the NRM knows that the people in the Lango sub-region still have Obote at heart. They might be coerced to support somebody else because of existence, because of those things I mentioned earlier on, because the peasants there,
conditions.
the people there do have a high sense of survival. They want to survive, but still at heart, name recognition and name identification is with Obote, and by extension with his son and the daughter-in-law. So that is why I think the contestation will be very stiff, because I'm told also that Acheng is a girl of the soil. She was a doctor in Lila for quite a long time and treated many people, and they appreciate what she was doing, and she has the state behind her. But also the other one has got the name of Obote behind her. Now, when it comes to the whole sub-region, which now is more or less defined by Obote legacy, and is still UPC at heart, in order for the President Museveni, to get legitimacy from there, to try to get some legitimacy and get the Lango people on his side, because every politician would want every region to be on his side, he may co-opt either Akena or the wife in the government, so that people now in Lango feel that they are eating, as it were, but they may be eating, and so there is a possibility, because I don't think Museveni would politically risk marginalizing the Obote family. I think it will be a political risk. So more or less, he will have to co-opt some of them, or other associates of UPC will be co-opted in the government, not because he loves them per se, or they love him per se, but because it is political arithmetic calculation, or political arithmetic, actually not so much algebra, or political algebra, so that you can at least have somebody from the Lango sub-region. And that is why President Museveni risked Buganda, in my opinion. That was a political miscalculation. In the last elections, he wanted to use the stick, not the carrot, to punish Buganda so that it could come to him. But I think it has not worked. What I mean here is that he didn't appoint prominent people from the Buganda sub-region. You know, Buganda is a very central region in the politics of Uganda, whether I like it or not. That is a fact. But you can imagine, in the hierarchy of order in Uganda, the president is not from Buganda, the vice is not from Buganda, the chief justice is not from Buganda, the speaker is not from Uganda, the army command is not from Buganda, the prime minister is not from Buganda, most prominent ministers are not from Buganda, like the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Defense, Minister of Education, Minister of Finance. Those are strategic ministries. They are not from Buganda. So more or less, I think he wanted to punish Buganda for not voting him. But in terms of politics, at times he should have had magnanimity and made one of those people in the precedence of order come from Buganda, so that he would be using him now to do the campaigning. But now whom is he using? He's using people like this Minister of State for for microfinance.
Castle.
Kasoro. Now, who is Kasoro in Uganda's image? Who is Kasoro? He's using this Minister of the Attorney General. But who is the Attorney General in Uganda's image? So I think that was a miscalculation. And I don't think Museveni will make the same mistake again to underrate the Obote Obote factor in the Rango sub-region and UPC generally, by the way, because I don't know where, I don't think that Eastern Uganda, especially Bugisu and the Teso sub-regions, have forgotten UPC roots.
And
they have
Prof,
not.
That's you stress a very important issue. I was going to quiz you on that. Do you think the same formula could be true for Nandala Mafabi in case that he loses? Is there a possibility he could be co-opted into the next government?
It depends how he loses. Because if he loses badly, he can be ignored because FDC is not a factor in the Bugisu sub-region. It is a factor in the sense that it has support there. But I don't think that support is a threat to NRM. NRM's legitimacy, per se. In fact, you can have an FDC, now is it PFF? PFF candidate in Rukunjiri, who may even lose elections, but the president will take Rukunjiri more seriously than he may take Bududa, because it can undermine your legitimacy when it is in Rukunjiri much more than when it is in Bududa, because I think Rukunjiri is more politically sensitive than the other place, the other place of Nandala Mafabi, because President Museveni knows where his political base lies. He knows. You remember what Kazora told us, the late Kazora, when he told us that the president told them as a caucus of MPs from Mankore, he says, when I appoint JJ Dongo, the people and he has these military vehicles taken to Teso, people shout and they are very happy, but JJ Dongo cannot even replace a section commander. And he said Precor, when he goes with a helicopter and lands in Karamoja and the people start eating grass, they think that I am their darling. And then he said that when they see Kazibwe, they were so think I love them, but in other words, he was saying, which powers does Kazibwe have? And they like, you had that Kazora's statement. So, similarly, do not take issues like Silver Konjiri lightly. That's why Mugumya is disappeared. How many people have we had disappeared in the constituency of Nandala Mafabi? Have we had them?
None.
Why has it been done in Rukunjiri? Why?
I must appreciate you, Professor Mwambutsya Ndebesa and Mr. Talwana Ernest, for your able participation on today's edition of Focus on Parliament. Many thanks to you, our esteemed viewers, for watching and for your time. We'll see you next time. Be blessed.